I'm going to be reviewing the book The Subtle Knife today by Philip Pullman. Philip Pullman is a sir, and so we afford him all of the honor and respect that he is due. This is another episode of Why I Like These Books. In the past, Why I Like These Books, I've struggled, right, with trying to meld the didactic and the entertaining, the lecturer and the let looser, the teacher and the spontaneous improviser. And so I'm going to try and lean more into that improvisational style in this video. And if it appears to be too entertaining and too vapid and too lacking in substance, well, I apologize, but I'm trying something new. In order to spice things up, I thought I might break up my reviews for Why I Like These Books into different sections. Section number 1, interesting tidbits, biographical and literary. Section number 2, the plot, spoiler-free or trying to be. Section number 3, the section that warms every English teacher's heart, and that would be themes. And then finally, section number 4, spoilers. I mean, like just a few spoilers. Just a few spoilers. A few. This is book number 2 of his Dark Materials. It's a trilogy by Mr. Pullman, Sir Pullman. Book number 1, you might have heard of it. It's called The Golden Compass. A movie was made of it about a decade ago. That movie was pretty awful. However, there is an HBO series out right now that stars none other than Lin-Manuel Miranda, or at least he's one of the characters in this series. I don't know, I haven't watched it. I don't have a subscription to HBO, but I've heard good things. Another interesting biographical detail about the author, he is avowedly atheistic. So he doesn't believe in God, or at least he said that he might be agnostic, so he just doesn't know. For not believing in God, he writes an awful lot about angels and God, and so this might be delving a little bit too much into an attempt at psychology, but I have a theory that he has a deep resentment with the church and with religion, and therefore it appears in his writing because this is his way of working it out, of moving beyond, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. I would classify this novel as a portal fantasy. What does that mean? It is a fantasy whereby the characters travel from one world into another via a magical portal. And in this, the portal maker is the knife itself, so it can cut through the fabric of space and time. Well, I guess not time, but it can cut through the fabric of space and you can travel from one world into the next. It is a multiverse, universes within universes upon universes, etc. The hero of this book, I would argue, is Will. Will on the cover is this guy right here, Will. Lyra is another hero, another protagonist of the book. Lyra was kind of the main protagonist of The Golden Compass. This book starts out in our world. The Golden Compass spent a lot of time establishing a universe in another world, so it really built that world, and he did a great job of building that world. We learned what naphtha lamps were, we learned what dust is, we learned what the magisterium is. The magisterium is another word for the church writ large, not necessarily the Catholic Church, not necessarily the Protestant Church, just the church. The church in these books, definitely the bad guy. Definitely the bad guy. But after all of that world building in the Golden Compass, we start off in our world, and we hardly ever go back to Lyra's world in this book. We go back a few times, but, you know, it's more of like an afterthought. We spend a lot of time in our world, and we spend a lot of time in another world, which is a world between the worlds, kind of like what occurred in the Chronicles of Narnia. If you've ever read those, The Magician's Nephew, World Between the Worlds, that's another story. C.S. Lewis, avowedly Christian, Screwtape Letters, Mere Christianity, big fan of God. Philip Pullman, not so much. And yet, they both write about spiritual things, and they both write portal fantasies. I don't know. We start out in our world with Will escaping from these bad dudes. They're chasing him and his mother. They're trying to get something. We later determined that something is his father's journal. Will's dad has been missing for ages, or at least for the majority of Will's childhood. He was in the military and he disappeared mysteriously up north. We later come to find out, this is kind of a spoiler, sorry, he traveled to another world through a portal. Will, in attempting to escape from these men who break into his house and attempt to steal the journal, Will knocks one down the stairs. This man hits his head. Will thinks that he has murdered him, so he has this idea in his head that he is a murderer throughout this entire book. It's a source of guilt, blah, blah, blah. Kind of a cliche trope, but it's okay. Will has escaped and he has run away from home. He is sort of desperate, and luckily, fortuitously, he stumbles upon none other than a portal. This is a portal into a different world, Chikatsa, or City Gaza. When Will walks through the portal, he discovers that this world is essentially abandoned. It's empty. It's like the day the earth stood still. There aren't any people in the city where he walks into. The city that he walks into is really interesting. It's described as this sort of Italianate architecture place. It reminds me a lot of Florence or Rome in that sense. Will meets Lyra in this city. They become best of friends. And in the future, maybe something more, little romantic interest. Just a little hint of that in this book. We have to wait until the Amber Spyglass to get the full romance, so read on for that. Why is Jakotsu abandoned? Well, we learn that it's actually not abandoned. It has two entities, two creatures in it, children and specters. Now, you know what children are, but specters, if you've read any of the Harry Potter books or watched the movies, if you know what a Dementor is, sort of like a gruesome ghoul, a banshee thing that steals your soul and that eats your essence. A specter is kind of like that, except a specter eats dust, and adults have a lot of dust around them. Dust is antimatter, consciousness, angelic material, universal wavelengths. I'm not entirely sure what dust is. Read the book, and if you have a clearer way of describing what dust is, let me know, but I think we can just think of dust as like the Higgs boson God particle sort of thing. I'm not going to spoil the ending yet, but I will say that this book has witches, and it also has demons. Demons not in the sense that we know them, not in the evil spiritual sense, but in the animal compadre sense. So a demon is sort of a manifestation of the other half of your spirit or soul, and it exists in an animal form. In your childhood, your demon can shapeshift, so it can take the form of a moth, it can take the form of a leopard, it can take the form of a monkey, it can take the form of a lemur, it can take the form of a cat. A little cat. Will, curiously enough, does not have a demon, at least in this book. When he travels to the world of the dead in the Amber Spyglass, he can see his demon, and so that's kind of cool, but he can't see his demon in this book. Lyra's demon's name is Pantalaimon, and he does not have a definite form yet, so he shapeshifts a lot. Eventually, I believe he becomes a pine marten? English teacher time. Themes. I know, you're just gonna have to deal with it. Innocence in childhood. It's no coincidence, I think, that the children are immune from the specters or from the preying of the specters. If this dust represents consciousness, it also represents, at least in the eyes of the church, sin. Ooh. Another major theme of this book is the importance of names. There are a lot of objects and individuals in this book that we don't really know the import of until we learn their name. And so this is maybe a commentary on actually the importance of language in general. We don't know the import of the knife until we learn its name. We don't know the import of Lyra until we learn her name. More on that in the spoilers section. And the last theme is religion in general. It plays a huge role in this book. And again, I think that the author maybe bears some resentment toward his religious roots, but that's neither here nor there. It's kind of here. Spoiler alert. Do not watch this section of the video unless you have in fact read the book. If you watch this section of the video, you have not read the book, I am not responsible for any feelings of sadness that you will experience. There's an incredibly endearing man in this book. His name is Lee Scoresby. His demon's name is Hester. Lee Scoresby dies one of the most tragic deaths in all of literature near the end of this book. If you read Lee's death and you do not experience an emotional reaction that is one of sadness and tears, then I question your humanity. You might be a psychopath, you might be an android, you might not have understood what you read. So maybe I can cut you some slack there, but probably you're an android. Another huge spoiler is that Lyra's true name, the prophecy that has been written about her, is Eve. So it's understandable that the Magisterium wants to stop her from repeating the mistakes of the original Eve. To wrap up why I like this book, unlike other sci-fi and fantasy books that are heavily allegorical, one thing in the book world stands for another thing in our world. That style can be very heavy-handed and it can browbeat you, and you can say, okay, I get it, I understand the allegory, very clever. Animal Farm, hashtag George Orwell, hashtag I'm calling you out. But this book, because it is a multiverse, everything in those worlds stands alongside of our world, and so it's not so heavy-handed, and it's actually a joy to read. It's light, it's breezy, it's entertaining, it's inspiring. It will transport you into a different world, literally, or at least reading-wise. And that's the best experience you can ever have with a book. That's why I like this book. Thanks for joining me. I will be back probably soon. I hope everyone is happy and healthy and not going outside.